I spent 3 years learning the hard way that doing good work is not enough. I always thought that if I just kept my head down, did good work, focused on my task, and just delivered, I would get noticed and people would give me rewards in exchange for some reason. But it turns out that that's not really how it works. Young, naive me didn't really realize that there's a whole hidden layer to being successful at work, and that's the part that no one really talks about. And I managed to somehow break it down into three main parts, which is empathy, optics, and politics. If I would have understood these things from the start, I think I would have saved myself a lot of frustration. And so in this video, I'm going to break it down for you so that you will know what I wish I knew 3 years ago. These are the invisible rules of work that actually matter. Number one, let's start with politics and relationships. Point number one is build solid relationships with everyone. A few years ago, a guy named Kiran reached out to me on Instagram when I was in Bangalore asking to buy me a beer in exchange for some advice on content creation. I agreed because why not? And I also just happened to be free on the day that he was asking to meet me. I had a great time and we continued to stay in touch and give each other tactical tips and advice on growing on YouTube. And eventually he actually pivoted from YouTube onto Instagram, and his Instagram page grew so big that he could actually quit his job and be a full-time content creator. This was 3 years ago, and now he's one of the most well-known content creators in Bangalore and in India. And people are coming up to him on the street all the time when we're together. Best part, we're still friends. So here's what I want to share. Most people only think about networking up. They're obsessed with impressing their boss, catching the attention of the VP, or trying to get a coffee chat with a startup CEO or a VC. And yeah, those are very important, but they're not enough. Those are not the only types of relationships that you should focus on. If you really want to build a strong network, I think you should be networking across and also down. And so that means building relationships with your teammates at your company. It means staying connected to people across other departments and also people at other companies at the same role as you. And also getting to know interns and junior team members. And also occasionally mentoring students and other people that are just starting out in their career. And here's why all of this is very important. The thing that most people miss is that people's career trajectories are always moving. The student that you think is just a student, they might end up joining your dream company 2 years later, or they might end up being the next unicorn startup founder. And if you built that bridge early when it was easy to do that, now you're just one message away from this person. The higher ups are obviously really important because they can get you opportunities right away. But the people who are at your level and the ones below are the ones that will actually grow with you. And when they move up, your entire network moves up. When they find opportunities, they might bring you with them. Most people only try to network with people above them because they're looking for instant wins. And I think that's a huge mistake. So the takeaway is that it's not just who you know, but it's also who knows you. When you build connections at every level, you're not just expanding your network, but you're also creating potential future opportunities with these people. The intern today could be a decision maker tomorrow. And the teammates that you have today could be your biggest advocates tomorrow. All right, point number 2 is don't talk behind anyone's back, and do not engage when someone else does. Office gossip is like quicksand. It seems harmless at first and maybe even a little bit entertaining. But the moment you step in, it's really hard to get out. And even worse, it leaves a stain. Here's the truth. If they gossip to you, they will also be gossiping about you. And when you engage, even if it's just listening, you're silently saying that you're okay with it. And that also makes you look like you're a part of it. Your reputation is being built, whether you realize it or not, with every single conversation that you're a part of. Here's why this is really important. In work environments, perception is reality. You might think that nobody notices, but they always do. If you're seen as trustworthy and drama-free, you'll be the kind of person that people want to vouch for. They know that you don't just stir the pot for no reason, you don't leak information, and you don't get involved in petty politics that are just going to be distracting for everyone. And when you're not in the room, the trust will pay off. People will always support you, advocate you, and shield you from all of the nonsense that goes on. So remember that people will always remember who was a part of the gossip, even if you only just nodded along. Instead of engaging, just deflect, redirect, and move on. Remember, you don't have to be a part of any conversation that you don't want to be a part of. It's not just about staying out of trouble, but it's also about positioning yourself as the one person that everyone can trust. All right, point number 3. Some work situations are just designed to not work for you. It's very important to know when to get out. So my end of studies internship was at a very large corporate company in Paris. It's not on my LinkedIn anymore and I'm not going to say the name, but let's just say that it was on paper the dream internship. The company had a brand name, it was in marketing, and it was the kind of internship that actually a lot of my classmates wanted to get. However, it was the only internship that I quit in one single month. From day one, I had a feeling that it wasn't for me. I felt out of place when I came to the office, and when I met my manager managers, I just didn't get a very inspired feeling. But I decided that maybe it's just the first days, maybe it's just me, I need to suck it up and move on. And then over the following days and weeks, it only actually got worse. The main thing that was really bothering me was that in that team that I was a part of, there was no space for creativity and new ideas. Any idea that I brought up only got shot down because, oh, we do it in a different way. It seemed like the managers already had a crystal clear playbook of what all the interns were supposed to be doing, and I was basically just following instructions from a manual every single day. And then I also learned that the company doesn't actually give out full-time positions to most of their interns, so it felt a bit like it was a dead end as well. The turning point, which I remember very vividly, was me being given a task where I was basically just transcribing a TikTok video into an Excel sheet so that the managers could write their comments on every single line. And I was like, there are tools for this. Why did I study 4 years of tech and 3 years at a top elite business school like HEC to be doing this at the age of 24? I was super frustrated, and from that day I started reaching out to startup CEOs and I started actively really looking for a job. A few days later I had a lead, and that came from a cold email that I'd sent out to a CEO, and a few days after that I actually got a job offer and I was like, okay, I'm gonna quit now. I felt super nervous at the time because that was the first time I was actually quitting a job. I felt like I was letting them down. I felt like I was being a bit of a jerk, but even then I knew that it was the right move for my career. So the learning was that not every work environment is built for growth, and not your growth anyway. Some companies are just structured to burn people out, intentionally or not. Some roles are designed to be dead ends, and sometimes the culture is just straight up toxic. The problem is that when you're inside of it, it's really hard to see. You start thinking that, oh, maybe it's just me. Oh, maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I'm the one that needs to improve. I need to work harder. And as a result, your own self-confidence starts to go down. And that's one of the most difficult parts of being in such an environment, which is that the longer you stay there, the lower your self-confidence gets and the harder it gets to actually leave. But you need to remember that sometimes you're not the problem, the environment is. Maybe it's a revolving door of employees because the company's expectations are just so realistic that they kick people out at the first sign of trouble. Maybe it's a manager who's never happy, who's always expecting you to do more than you're doing. The goalposts keep changing. And the reason for that is that maybe they're just going through something in their lives and you have no control over that. Maybe it's a startup that you've joined that pivots every 3 months because the CEO sees something new and shiny on LinkedIn. And as a result, it sort of just feels like every 3 months you're starting from zero all over again. If you're in any of these situations where it's basically a structural problem, no amount of hard work that you do is going to get you out of that. And the best thing that you can do in that situation is to just quit and leave it. Don't consider it as a failure. Consider it as a strategic move for your career. So the takeaway is that leaving the wrong place creates space for the right one. If you've tried to make it work, you've communicated, you've adapted, you've pushed through, and it's still broken, then unless you're the CEO, it's not your job to fix it. It's your job to find someplace better. Now let's move on to part 2 of this video. Optics and expectations. The first lesson here is that you are your own internal PR team. You need to make yourself look good. Here's the reality. No one's really keeping track of your wins. No one's counting your successes and no one's waiting to hand you a promotion. If you don't tell people what you're achieving, it's like it never happened. It's just business as usual. People sometimes notice when things are going wrong, but people rarely notice when things are going right. So yeah, think of yourself as your own internal PR team. You have to be your own advocate, your own storyteller. If people don't see the work, it didn't happen. Here's why it's important. Perception is 80% of your reputation at work. Skill is only the other 20%. You might be doing incredible work, but if nobody knows about it, it's basically like planting seeds and not watering them. You're doing the work, but you're not going to get anything in exchange for it. The people that get promoted, the ones that get looped into high visibility projects and given a lot more responsibilities, they don't just do good work, they also talk about the good work that they're doing. And I'm going to tell you one really simple way to actually do this that you can implement starting today. Send out a quick weekly update to your manager, even if they haven't asked for one. It just has to be 3 lines. What you worked on this week, what you've achieved this week, and what you plan to work on the next week. By just taking 10 minutes every week to do this, there's no way that your manager is not going to appreciate it. All right, point number 2 in optics and expectations is under-promise and over-deliver always. This one is actually really simple. Only promise what you know you can exceed, because people remember what you exceed, not just what you achieve. If you promise to deliver something in 7 days and deliver it in 4, you look like a hero. But if you promise to deliver something in 4 days and then deliver it in 6, you look like you're struggling. The work is the same, but the perception is totally different. Here's why it works. When you consistently under-promise and over-deliver, you set up a mental framework in people's heads. They start to think that if they give the work to you, it's gonna get done right and it's gonna get done on time, if not early. And that's where trust is built. You build a reputation for exceeding expectations. It's not always the loudest person in the room that gets promoted. It's the person that people trust to be able to do bigger, better, and higher stakes projects. The key here is strategic under-promising. You're not under-promising so you can slack off with that extra time. The extra buffer that you create is to protect yourself if there's any unforeseen delays and still be able to deliver on time. And of course, when you cross that finish line early, it's seen as a bonus and not as an expectation. Alright, point number 3 is keep 20% of your capacity as slack. Most people, especially early in their careers, max out their schedules at 100%. They fill their days with meetings, projects, deadlines, and when something unexpected happens, and it inevitably does happen, they're not prepared to deal with it. And then they have to disappoint people, push back deadlines at the last moment, and that none of those things are good. So I call it the 80% rule. Don't ever book yourself beyond 80% capacity. The 20% of the slack that you give is not for doing nothing, it's for handling the unpredictable. And when things go wrong, and they always go wrong, you'll still have the time as well as the mental energy to adjust, pivot, and deliver. And here's the best part. When you don't need that 20%, you can use that extra time to go deeper on projects, learn something new, or just breathe for a minute. And all of those things will help you do better work in the long run. So the takeaway here is that you need to create space in your schedule for the unexpected. Because when you can handle surprises and emergencies gracefully, that's when you get seen as dependable. And that is what makes you invaluable to the company and to your team. Alright, let's now go to the third section of this video. And that is empathy. Empathy is your secret weapon, and I'm going to share with you 3 ways that you can be empathetic at work starting today. Number 1, don't ever report a problem to a superior without also proposing a solution. Here's the thing, no one likes problems. Everyone's got 10 problems that they need to be solving that day. But you know what everyone does like? Solutions. Everyone loves good news. So when you bring a problem to your manager, you're just adding on to their list of things to solve. But when you come with a solution in hand, you're not just a messenger, you're also a problem solver. The difference is massive. Imagine this scenario. Person A goes to their manager and says, "We blocked on this feature because the API ended up being way too expensive and we don't have the budget for it. And I'm not sure how to fix it. Do you think you could help me with that?" Whereas person B says, "Okay, look, here's an update. The API that we were originally going to use turned out to be way more expensive than I thought. But then I went and researched about different APIs that we could use and actually found one that is way under budget and delivers performance that's around 80% as good. I've already made a prototype, and if you can give me a go ahead, we can get the project launched by next week." Do you see the difference between the two? One is adding to the manager's mental load. You're starting from a place of being confused. The manager now has an extra task on their plate, but the other one is removing tasks from the manager's plate. It's way easier to just ask for a go-ahead than to ask for an entire solution to a big problem that you're having. And by the way, that is actually a real story. I was person B in that scenario. So the thing to remember is that when you propose solutions, you're positioning yourself as someone who can think proactively. Someone that's not just observing problems, but who's actively trying to solve them. And managers notice. Because when fires pop up in the company, and they always do, they want someone that they can trust to put those fires out, not just to point at them and scream. You might be asking, "Oh, but what if my solution isn't perfect? What if I don't actually feel equipped to come up with a solution?" Even if your solution isn't perfect, the fact that you tried to think of a solution and brought at least a proposal in hand, that shows initiative. It shows that you're thinking critically and taking ownership. And that is exactly the kind of person that managers want on their team. Alright, point number 2. Lean to the side of over-communicating. Here's the reality. Assumptions kill projects. A task that you think everyone should be able to understand because it's so simple is easily misunderstood. And that little gap of misunderstanding, it just widens the further along you go in the project. A hidden misalignment is very easy to fix when you're just 1 week into the project. It just takes a 30-minute call. But a misalignment between 2 teams 3 months into the project can actually mean failure of a project. And that is why you should always lean towards over-communicating. Not just in meetings, but also in Slack messages, emails, and even one-on-ones and calls. When you think you've made it clear, make it clearer. Always recap at the end of every meeting what were the action items, what were the things that you decided, and if something feels a bit iffy or unclear, ask questions. People rarely get annoyed if you're clear and transparent, or even if you ask a lot of questions. But people always get annoyed if you're being vague or leave things unsaid, which then come back later to bite you. I learned this early on. If there's room for misinterpretation, someone will misunderstand or misinterpret it. By sending frequent updates, asking clarifying questions, and being specific, you're not just avoiding mistakes, you're also building trust. Your team knows that you're not going to drop the ball because you're keeping them in the loop every step of the way. When people know exactly what's happening, they don't have to guess. They trust you more. And when you have that trust, you get more autonomy, more responsibilities, and that's how you're actually able to climb up. All right, point number 3 is something that I learned recently that changed my life. And that is the no hello rule. Have you ever got a message that just goes like, hey, how's it going? Or even worse, just a hey. And you know that they're not just messaging you because they want to know how it's going. They don't actually care about how it's going. You know it's about something else. But you still do the whole song and dance of replying back and be like, oh yeah, it's going well. What's up? How about you? And then you're the one who ends up waiting for a response when they were the one that sent you a request. Now you're invested, you're distracted, and this is before you even know what they're asking you to do. It wastes everyone's time. And that is why you should always follow the no hello rule. Never start a message with just hello or hey. Get to the point in your very first message. People are busy. Your manager, your team, your colleagues, they don't have time to wait for the conversation to get to the point. When you open with context, you're showing respect for the other person's time and energy. And that way, you get faster responses as well. So, here's how to do this. Instead of just saying, hey, how's it going? Get straight to the point and go like, hey, I need your input on the Q3 marketing strategy that we're working. There's some missing data on slide 2, which I think you would have. So that way they know exactly what you want. There's no back and forth. And if you saw the message 2 hours later, you can still respond back pretty quickly, giving them exactly what they want. The reason why people don't do this is because they think it comes across as rude to get straight to the point in a message. And yes, it is rude if you're doing it in person. If you go to a person's desk and straight away get to the point being like, hey, you have data that I need. Can you please give me that data? That is obviously rude. So in a real life, in-person interaction, we're used to going like, hey, how's it going? And then like waiting for like a visual cue from the other person to continue going. But in asynchronous modes of communication, so that's like email, text message, things like that, you don't have to do this. It's way better to get straight to the point. It saves everyone a lot of time. Ooh, all right, that was a long video. The reason I wanted to make this video is that looking back, I know that it wasn't just the work that I did that mattered. It was about how I showed up, who I built relationships with, and all of these small signals that I sent every single day that made people feel like they could trust me. Mastering empathy, politics, and optics is not just career advice. It's actually how you thrive in environments that most people just try to survive in. And on this channel, we talk about thriving, not about surviving. So if you're just starting out, don't wait to learn this stuff the hard way. Apply it now and watch what happens.